everyone, it's Cheryl. Welcome back to Heirloom Afternoon. How are you doing today? I am doing wonderfully well, and it's Tuesday. That means we are here on the set of Heirloom Afternoon. Welcome. Today, my friends, darn it, we're going to be talking about the darning egg and the darning tools, which have not changed in quite some time. And before I get into all of that, I just wanted to say hello. If you don't know who I am Cheryl Muppin Sloboda, and you can find me at muppin.com. Today we have a new quilt on the set. Good afternoon, Rhonda. How are you doing today? I hope you guys can all hear me. If you can, give me a little thumbs up, a little heart, or whatever, so I know that the sound is working. Today we have a brand new quilt on the set, and I cannot wait to tell you more about it. It is Roxanne's here as well. Hello, welcome. So today, this quilt, wow, I have a lot to say about this quilt. It speaks speaks to me in a lot of ways, but let's bring up Quilt Cam so that you can see it. I always laugh at the difference between the lighting here on this set. So today, this quilt, actually this month, this is the quilt that's going to be up for Heirloom Afternoon. Good afternoon, Martha's here. Hello. So what can I say that isn't going to break your heart about this quilt? This quilt was given to me in pieces. And as you can see, someone has cut large swaths out of this quilt. And let's just talk about that for a second, okay? Because there are pieces, there are stains and other problems with this quilt. But this quilt is from, I want to say, the mid-century. Down here on the bottom, you can start to see that there's a lot of damage, a lot of like torn edge. The back is fraying really badly. But in my opinion, this quilt could have probably used just a new backing, and it would have probably been fine, except for these parts down here, which are completely shredded. And then, of course, giant sections of it have been cut off. And this quilt was actually turned into, it was a cutter quilt. And this was how it was given to me. These pieces are all that is left. Now, this particular quilt is not, I wouldn't say it's very precious. It is obviously to me, all quilts are precious, and I know some people feel that way as well. But this particular quilt was a kit, and it is not a, so in that sense, there are many copies of this quilt. The problem that I have, and I'm going to bring my my little camera over so that I can put this on my lap so that you can see this. And let me just switch from this camera to the other camera here. Go away, Quilt Cam. There we go. And let's show the big screen here. So this is why this to me is really just super unfortunate. And I know that it's hard to see here, and I'm putting my thumb next to here so that you can see it. But this is 1/4 to 1/2 inch patch quilting, hand quilted. So the hatch quilting here, this background is completely quilted. The whole thing is quilted with these little cross hatches, and they are phenomenal. And the tiny, tiny, tiny little stitches there. And so yes, these appliques are a kit. The thing that makes this quilt absolutely sing is the fact that it has this tiny, tiny quilting. And then, somebody was just like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a pillow or something, and just cut parts of it out. So unfortunately, this quilt is not it's not complete. I only have it. I have it hanging upside down, I guess, in your view, because there is no top edge with which to hang it from. Martha, I agree. It's one of my favorite quilts in my collection, and it happens to just be, at this point, cutter scrap. So if you are at all interested in the concept of these mid-century quilt kits, there is a website that you can go to, and that website is called quiltkitid.com. And there she has a book, and I'm showing you the book that you can get. I think it's $35. And in it, she has this is Rosemary Werner, and she has identified these kits, and you can see something really similar there on the cover of her book. The idea is that when you are able to identify these kits, you can decide whether or not you want to cut into them or not, use them for cutter quilts or what have you. I spoke to a quilt appraiser last weekend, and we had a very interesting talk about cutting into quilts and cutter quilts. Oh, hello, Gwen. How are you? So, because quilts like this were very common and they are everywhere, I guess in a way, if you are a collector, you would like to collect what I would think were prime or premium examples like this one. And especially if you've never seen this design before or anything like that, you would think, oh, well, I want to reproduce this one block or what have you. I think that that's very, a very good thing. And this has these also, you can probably see here, these rings of feathers that have been hand quilted in as well. And they kind of run through, like, between the flower sections. And the rest is this gorgeous, and I mean absolutely gorgeous, let's put it back up on Quilt Cam, absolutely gorgeous cross hatch quilting that just covers the rest of it. Now, again, I can't be mad at the person who cut into it, because it's a cutter quilt, and it's supposed to, people reuse quilts all the time. I, however, something about me says, please give me all of your trash. And so somebody gave me the rest of the quilt. Now, a good chunk of it can be saved and probably turned into like a small throw or a small coverlet, which I may do down the road. But right now it still lives in its like half stage here. So yeah, that's this month's quilts, which again, I absolutely love. I do not know who the quilt kit maker is. I would like to get Rosemary, get her book. And her book is called Quilt Kits 20th Century Shortcuts. And these were very popular in the mid 1900s. So we're talking, 1940s and 50s. 30s, 40s, and 50s. And there were people who made kits available. You could just buy the kit and then, everything that came with it. And every once in a while on eBay, you can find one of these. And so I just don't want you to lose out on the idea that some quilts that are being turned into clothing and pillows or what have you that were cutter quilts like this one. This is the remnants, the leftover of that cutter quilt process. But I love this quilt. I would have never cut into it. I would have tried to save more of it if I could. But it is a beautiful quilt, but it was a kit. And so there are others out there, perhaps even better examples of it. So I try not to, come down on either side of the whole like cutting into vintage quilts thing. Obviously, you do what you like with your own quilts, but for me, I can't do it. And if somebody says, I have all these quilts, pieces, would you want them? I usually say yes. And so send me your cutter quilt trash. Okay, so I wanted to give you a quick update on last week's episode. I did say to you that I was going to create more flowers on this background, and then I was going to quilt it and do more to it. So if you missed our reveal of the German tuft work from last week, definitely want to go back and catch that because we had a lot of fun cutting into that. I am going and doing another flower. This one, I'm doing 2 layers of the purple over the blue, and then there will be another lighter purple over the top of it. So there will be, it's very interesting. Oh, Sylvia, you are absolutely right. And we did have a conversation while I was talking to these quilt appraisers in Texas. We had a really interesting conversation about cutter quilts or quilts that are very common and ubiquitous in the antique community, right? Because quilt kits like this are in effect a dime a dozen, right? And so our grandmother flower garden quilts and other things like that. And you have that same dilemma as libraries and librarians. And actually, we as a family are going through this as well. What do libraries do when a book and the information contained within that book are completely outdated? And so Donna, hello. What do you do with that book? And that book ends up going into the trash, and you think, oh my gosh, I could never throw away a book. That's knowledge. I can't conceive of a library even putting a book into the trash. But if that book is so outdated and its information is so outdated, you don't want that book anymore to be in circulation. And there are copies of those books for historical research purposes in lots of places, but your average library doesn't need a set of encyclopedias from 1979, which is what's happening with my encyclopedia set. And my dad is like, nobody wants these encyclopedias. And quite frankly, they're destined for the recycle bin. And the problem, again, we have with quilts and vintage work is there is a lot of it. There's a lot of doilies. There's a lot of embroidery. There's a lot of, all of those things. It's not that I'm saying it's okay to cut into it, because personally, myself, I would not do that. But that isn't to say that, is it museum worthy? Is it things like that? That's what we have to look at. My feeling personally is I don't want to cut into it, but I will save this remnant, this beautiful remnant, and I still have it and I can talk about it. So it's a wonderful teaching tool, and so that is where I am on that front. So Sylvia, I agree with you. It is a dilemma similar to what's happening with your local libraries and books and things like terrible 1979 encyclopedias that don't even have the right information in them anymore. So we do have to consider that. We do have to think about that as we go along. Today, we are going to be talking about a very common tool. And honestly, I personally have never done it because we live in an era of fast fashion. So this is very timely. This conversation, this discussion is very common. And so once again, I'm going to point you to 3 books that I have been using for my research right now. The first one is The History of Needlework Tools and Accessories. This book it's in black and white. It's fairly old. I think we talked about this. It was from like the mid 60s. And this book also, which is a reprint, it's called Old Time Tools and Toys of Needlework. This is a Dover book that is a reprint of a 1920s era sewing book. So both of these books is what we're going to be working from today. Now, one of the things that is really interesting about what we're going to talk about, which is the darning tool, the darning egg. And many of us probably have one of these, or we have one in our sewing box that's been passed down to us, or we're collectors like me, and you have quite a few of them. And I wanted to talk about some of the differences in the darning eggs themselves, but also the history of the darning egg and what's really interesting about some of the darning tools out there. So let's jump into it. And this is from, this is in reverse. Let's fix that. Yeah, there we go. So this is the book. This is this book, Old Time Tools and Toys of Needlework. And there is a chapter about darning eggs. And this particular one was salvaged from the wreck of the Morning Star. And so this was in a wreck, in a shipwreck, and was found. And then, of course, you have this one here that is a gourd that has been basically been dried and used as a darning ball. Now, we have to remember we have disposable socks and underwear, but that was not the case in the many years before us. And most people would have taken the time to fix their own socks and their own clothing. They would repair them with a darning type stitch. Now, this book here has some really cool examples of the darning egg. And here we go. So this one here is a ceramic version, which I find really interesting. These also, again, these ceramic ones would have been sold at your tourist areas and things like that. Here's also a chest or a work box, and it has several darning eggs inside of them, and these eggs are made out of horn. So they were hard material, and they were able to you were able to take your stitches across the edge of that egg. Now the egg is the typical size that, or the typical shape that you see, and there's plenty of these types of things available, and I have several here in the egg shape. And a lot of times you find egg shaped darners or darners, out there in your antique shops or whatever, and they will be painted black. Now you're probably wondering, like, why? And you might even have a plastic version that came much later. There was a plastic version that was half black and half white. I do have one of those, and I believe it's in my grandmother's sewing box. So I'll have to go into my grandmother's box. I don't go into grandma's box very often because I want to keep all the contents of grandma's box all together. That's my goal, at least. But hers is plastic, and it's half black and half white. Painted half black on one side, and it's or not painted, but it's plastic, black plastic on one side, white plastic on the other. So why is that? Well, if you have, and I had to go look for some socks that had holes in them because I usually just throw them away, but I've been saving this sock for this very reason. See, as you place this in here, you're able to see your area that needs to be repaired much easier, especially if it's a white sock, which they usually were a lighter color because the linen and cotton wouldn't have been dyed. It wouldn't have been. It would have been probably just natural color. So you usually find darners, and they're usually really worn away. All the black paint will have been chipping off and things like that. The reason for that is, of course, because it was very well used. And here on this one, you can see in the light that there are plenty of scratches and gouges in this. So this was definitely used. It was not used for that. Now, this one here is a pretty little turned version, and it's flat on this one end, and that's so that you could have a flatter area. Let's say you're doing a dress or something else that isn't a sock that you don't need to have the curve for. You have that flat area so that you could darn across. Like, let's say you get a little hole in your shirt. You want that to be flat. You don't want it to be poked and pushed out. So there are flat topped darners as well. These two I picked up really inexpensively. This one I think was $5. This one here for $50. So they're not terribly expensive sewing tools to pick up. They were usually made locally by your local person. And this one here is from my in-laws. And this one is really unusual because it's got quite the long long stick on it, right? So you would think initially that this is not a sock darner, that it's either probably some kind of kitchen tool, but it is not. It is a sock darner because it is made for longer socks, and it is also extremely handy should you need to sit with it. You could sit and put it between your legs, and it would rest on either your leg or your chair, and you could then put your project over it like so, and then you could have it resting and not all in your hand. So it was just a convenience to make it a longer stick. I think this was pretty smart by somebody to make a longer version. Now, again, you also had like hosiery that would come all the way like up, and then you would have usually your hose would be held up with clips or even with ties or things like that. So you wouldn't have the necessarily to need, you would want a longer one because you would need to get all of that hosiery onto that stick. There are a couple other versions that I've picked up along the way as well. Here's a really cool one. This is called like a mushroom darner. And this one comes with a little clip. And as you can see, once again, very well loved, very well used. And this one, you would put your project inside like so. And then in order to hold it in place, you would replace the metal clip. And that way you're getting the area that you would like to enclose, made nice and taut, and it's all held for you so you don't have to do that grip with your own hand. Also, there were darners that were used as advertisements, and this is the A Practical Stocking Darner and Needle Case. And again, super well loved on the top. I like to see that usually. And then as you open this, it comes apart, and you have this stamped on here. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Come on. There we go. You have darning and then needle sizes here. Well, this little turn, you can see this hole. That would be how you would turn, and then you would shake out the needle that you would like. And if you wanted a different size. And then also when you were finished with your needle, you could just insert it back in there. And then that would be a needle storage case as well. So, again, they would go down in there. There are none in there. And so I don't know how easy it would be to get that out of that little hole. But you can see there for the darning needle, it does say darning on there. Let's see if we can get it to... There we go. Yeah, so it says darning, and then it's got 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then, you have the hole, and then, of course, a little line telling you which one you're pointing at. And then when you're done, in order to keep them from all falling out, you just put the cap back on. This little guy I picked up for $12. So these are super, super common. They're usually, if there is any kind of sewing material in your antique shop, this is going to be something that you will be able to find pretty easily, is a darning egg. Now, these ones with the sticks on them, I really like these too. But this one and this one are not exactly the same. This one is more of a handle and also can stand upright because of that flat top. This one, on the other hand, is a glove darning edge. And I want to show you this because I do have a glove. It's that season, right? And so you would be able to put the finger, that end inside of the finger, and then able to darn the tips of the gloves, especially if you have a glove that you really like, or a mitten that you really like, or if you are a knitter, crocheter, and you have a pair of socks and they develop a hole, like what, oh my gosh, what do we do? And so this is a great little egg darner that also has the glove end, which is the way you hold it normally, but also this end. As you can see, that's the difference between these two. This one here does not have that glove darning end. So not quite the same. So could you do it with this one? Probably. We can stick this one into that glove pretty easily, and then we can access that as well. So you could use the big long darner for that as well. So what is darning? Okay, because I think that that's the other thing, and I've got this like I am not going to wear this sock anymore. So don't go, Cheryl, this is so useless on a pair of socks that quite literally cost like cents on the dollar. But we have to remember that we were not so lucky back then. We did not have these tools at our disposal. We had socks that we probably needed to wear, couldn't afford new pairs, etc. So darning was well used well into current times. And so especially if you have, again, socks that are your favorite pair, or, they are also, just super well loved. So let's say this is my favorite pair of socks. And a lot of the instructions for these materials, they tell you to do like a running stitch around here and pull tight. And unfortunately, that does not create a very nice surface in which you want to have in your underneath your foot even, right? So if you just pull this tight and like made this lump here and stitched over the edge, you would end up being able to feel that on the bottom of your foot, and you would probably not like this at all. You'd probably end up throwing that pair of socks away anyway, because it would be causing blisters on your foot. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the darning stitch, and the darning stitch is almost like a weave. Now I'm using a 12 weight. You could also use embroidery floss for this. And what we're trying to do is to create like a grid, almost like a matrix across the surface of this. And we're going to get to places like here where there's nothing, right, except your long expanse of like a long stitch here. But we're going to get to why we're doing that in a moment. So, again, we're trying to just go into the edge of the fabric, and then we're going to have that long stitch that goes all the way across. This is where having a long needle is really, really helpful. These long needles I'm using, these are, of course, our own Heirloom sewing needles, and they work really great with these heavier weight threads, and this is 12 weight. You would also use embroidery floss. And what I'm trying to do is to go across the surface here to create like almost like a warp and a weft. And in a way, we're kind of doing a weave to bridge this open spot. And if you've ever seen a darned sock, you will see that it's been stitched across like this. Now, this is a pretty big hole. Okay. Oh, I just went around another, knocked over my other darning eggs. This is a pretty big hole. So you're seeing it, across this wide divide here. It is very unusually shaped. This is on the heel of my sock. So it's definitely a spot that gets a lot of traffic. And you can even see here where I've worn a lot of that thin. So you're just trying to go into the edge, and you're going to make a couple of stitches, and then you're going to run all the way across. And you're going to try to make a couple stitches on the other side. Now, again, we're not going to create, we're trying not to just stitch around here and pull it shut. That's not exactly what darning is about. It's about creating a almost like a weave across this surface. And even where this area is really worn and we're going into some like threadbare stitching here, you would even go into that spot. Now, a big hole like this was probably usually patched. You would keep old socks, you would keep little scraps, and you would patch this with a scrap instead of doing this bridge, method here. So more than likely a big hole like this would have been patched with another thing. And so, here we already know that this threadbare area, we could go back and stitch into any threadbare areas. If you're getting threadbare spots on like the tip of your gloves, you can darn them before they create a hole. And here I'm doing this in a basic way. I'm not really making these stitches as close as I could. So Debbie says, a stitch in time saves 9. Absolutely. And that phrase, comes from things like this, where if you take this moment to darn this hole before it got this big, it would have actually saved you more time on the other end. You wouldn't have quite this giant hole. Donna, welcome. So yeah, it's a lot of cool. So we're getting down here to the end, and we're just going through a couple more layers down here. Okay, so now we have this section of the weave. We can start by stitching over here, and we're going to just pick up and down, over and under as best we can. There we go. Over and under this area over here. And that's going to be the start of our creating our little bridge. Now, up here, we probably need another expansion. So I'm going to do one more up there. There we go. And we're going to, again, here where it's curling over, we want that to lay a little bit flatter. So that's going to come when we start going up and down into these stitches. So we're just trying to get both edges, and then we'll be able to start in the middle. And the middle is going to go very much like weaving. So here we are. We're at the bottom. And we're going to go up and over and up and over. And this is where you're going down into the surface of the darning egg. And there we go. And you can see there the first expanse. So we can come back the other way. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we are creating a weave here. And you want that weave to be opposite of the it's like weaving, when you're weaving strips of paper or fabric or whatever, you're trying to go in the other direction from where you are, and then you end up coming down into the fabric, and that's going to anchor that whole section there. And so, yeah, we're going under here, so we're going under and then over, and that's where you can start feeling that the needle is going down into the wood of the darning egg. And this gets very tight really quickly, which is the whole point, because we're trying to create stitches here where there are none. We're trying to replace cloth where there is none. And that's what this weave here is supposed to do. It's supposed to bridge this giant hole. And again, this probably could have been benefited from a patch of some sort. So you would take, your one of those socks that just is beyond repair anymore, and you would take that and just cut a little scrap of it and use it to help bridge this hole. So you can see how we're building back up the stitches of the sock so that it can be worn again. And, again, we don't have this issue in our modern lives, right? Because, socks are pretty inexpensive. And however, and let me just say, socks aren't, they're just not everybody, not everybody can afford a pair of socks. And my understanding, if you believe the commercials for Bombas socks, they donate a pair of socks for every pair that is bought from them. And that's because they say in homeless shelters, socks are the number one requested thing. And so, not everybody can afford a pair of socks. And having decent socks to protect your feet from your shoes is something that's been long, in history. And of course, was very important during the war times in order to have clean, dry socks. If you got, if you didn't have good socks, you didn't have good foot hygiene, you had some problems in the army. So, so this was something to keep in mind. So I'm just going to come into this here with the knot. I'm going to take a little stay stitch so that stays. And then I'm going to continue with the weave on this side. And it is hard to determine which ones you need to do first, which side. But you kind of just use your needle, and I like to swipe it under so that it gets under and over the way it should. And you would continue to build this in that way. And, in this book that I'm reading, the author says that when she was young and she was ill and had asked to stay home from school, her mother would say that she was allowed to stay home from school, and if she could sit quietly and darn her brother's socks. And so she said, I never really wanted to stay home because nothing sounded worse to her than darning her brother's socks. Which I gotta tell you, I wouldn't want to darn my brother's socks. So we are starting to build this up on this side. I hope that you can see that. And you would continue to do so. And you could even, again, go back and forth here on this end to fill in additional warp stitches or weft stitches. The weaving stuff I'm not so good at. And so, again, I think a lot of it is the trick of, which way are you going? That's this, opposite of the stitch before it, in order to create that weave that we're trying to do in darning. So did you know that this is how darning was done? And like you can darn, there's a darning stitch on most sewing machines now too. So if you do need to darn clothing, it's a lot easier to just, throw it under the sewing machine and do it that way. And I have used the darning stitch quite a lot on my machine. My darning stitch on my jeans, I usually wear out the areas inside of the crotch, like where my thighs rub together. That's usually where I wear out all of the clothing. And so I usually go back and start reinforcing it right away with some with the darning stitch and some denim repair thread, which you can get from Metler. And I like doing that. I like having, repaired the jeans rather than trying to get them, just buying new ones every time because jeans are expensive. Now that would be one that, again, you're probably like, yeah, I would probably take the time to repair a pair of jeans, but not a pair of socks. And I don't blame you, because these are not necessarily, to me, a sock is disposable unless it's been like a knitted sock or I crocheted the sock. Then I want to keep them, and I do wear them. So if they do get a hole, I do repair them. And I mean, I've told people I am the slipper queen. I love slippers. So if I can, I will wear slippers around the house. And I am so hard on a pair of slippers. Like I go through slippers like every couple of months. And so I've darned the heel of a good, cute slipper. So, especially like a little crocheted or knitted pair, they repair up real easy like this. And then you have this spot here, which is fresh and new, and you're trying not to create any lumpy bumps so that your feet aren't, feeling those little bumps and then getting a little callus there or whatever. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that as you're doing this, right here where this is all bunched up, we want that to uncurl because we don't want that to create a little hard spot in our sock. Now you're probably like, Cheryl, you're really going to wear this sock? I don't know. I mean, I might have it on my set as a reminder of how to do this. But, as you can see, probably a sock yarn would have been a better option here than this little 12 weight or, thread. You could always darn with, like more of a yarn material, that, like maybe even that tapestry wool we were using for the other stuff. And that's because we want to have more, it'll cover the surface quicker. These stitches are very tiny. And we're going through that thread. We want to go under that thread. We don't want to go pierce the thread. We want to go under the thread because we're creating this little weave that we're doing here. And so, the part about the egg is one, to stretch the surface, but also, to help us maintain tension on here, to help us create these this weave here that we're trying to do, because we're trying to fill back in this hole. And it can also be used on a place that's wearing out. So again, if you have like a great thing that you love and it's got like the elbow is wearing out, this is absolutely what you can do on that little spot. And a lot of the visible mending things are big and trendy right now. Having visible mending on your jeans, visible mending, on your, on the cuffs and sleeves of your shirts and things like that. It is a upcycling and a thrifty thing to do, but again, you kind of have to be in a mindset where you really want to do this. I would say that it's not for everybody. Because there would be people out there that I'm sure are like, Cheryl, you should have just thrown that sack away. I was going to throw the sack away, but then I was like, hey, I need a darning demo. So I kept my terrible little sock. And so you can see here, we're building this up. I'm feeling all of this. It feels nice and flat. It doesn't feel like if we had just gone around this and pulled it tight and had it, if we pulled it tight, it would have created this little like knob, and that little knob would have been terrible on your foot or on your heel. It would create that little hard spot, and you would definitely feel that later. I know I would. So here's a spot here where I've got this huge gap, right? And I can come back in and do a couple extra rows. This is where you do feel the surface of the wood. And I'm just going to, and I feel the needle scraping it. So that is something that, when you think like, well, how did all of these, darning eggs get all gouged up? It's because you do use your needle to skim the surface of the material. And you can feel it going down into there. So we need to go this way. There we go. And, I'm just resting the end of this darning tool on the table. Most of the time you would have held it in your hand, and there are glass darners, and a glass darner would have been used on your very fine hosiery. Okay, so any of your like your nylons, things like that, you would have used a glass egg, because that would not have snagged as you put it into the garment. So we are using this. You have to be careful when you do the darn. You want to make sure you're doing the weave properly. So yeah, the glass darners were used for doing your pantyhose. And pantyhose, oh my gosh, they were silk. They were expensive, but they were required, and it was very fashionable. You had nude legs with no hosiery. You were, that was not acceptable, and so you would have found a way to save your hosiery. You would have found a way to darn them, and you would normally get the holes on the toes and the heels which is why these are shaped the way they are. You got these flat surfaces to do the heels. You have the round surfaces to do the toe. And you can still find darned clothing in the vintage stores and things like that. Darned quilts. You can darn a hole in a quilt with some visible stitches like this so that, future people will know that you repaired it, and that the repair may be a crude repair, but at least, you're using it to stabilize the fabric. So that would be one of the, if you're a quilter, one of the ways that you can use darning in your quilts. But, this is not hard. I mean, we've been sitting here for just a few minutes today, doing this little weave process. And it's actually kind of relaxing. I don't think that I see a giant future of of darning my socks in any near way, but I think it is. I do see why people did this, why it was important, and why these tools are pretty much in everybody's socks or in everybody's sewing box, because you do never know when you need to darn something, and these long needles. Here's just yet another use for your heirloom needle. And so, my friends, oh darn. Yeah, I agree. This is a lot of fun. And, it is a very, it's relaxing, but also I can definitely see going back in here with a couple other colors. And, if I were in the wilderness or, found myself, on it, like, let's say you're on a super, hiking or doing all kinds of other things, and you don't have a way to close up that hole. If you create that other kind of hole, you're going to end up having a painful journey. And so that's something to keep in mind. So here's what we've got so far on the bottom of my old sock. And you can see how we're building up some of that extra spot there, filling in that hole. And they would even go ahead and darn all of this so that this would not wear as fast. So, again, not something we're really commonly doing today, but here, should you find yourself with something kind of fun, a little bit of visible mending, so on and so forth. I've got, again, this glove. This is a nice glove. These are wool gloves. And it created this little hole here. And so I will probably match that to, but I will do that same effect. I will do that back and forth look to that, and probably not with a non-visible color. So anyway, I hope you've had a wonderful darn episode. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday at 12 noon. We're doing this every week. Hope you've enjoyed learning about the darning egg. And as I find more examples, I'll bring them on, but we'll definitely have more stuff going on. And Martha, I know. So I hope you've had a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me. Definitely we'll have some more fun for you next week. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Bye-bye.